When you're trying to lose weight, maintaining a calorie deficit over a long period of time can definitely be hard. Over the last few months, I've actually really been able to dial in my meal timing as well as my training schedule to make it a whole lot easier to adhere to a calorie deficit. Now, before we get into all this, here's some things you're definitely going to want to take note of. How much of a calorie deficit should you actually be at? I would recommend going no steeper than a 500 calorie deficit on average per week. Now, one thing you really want to avoid is going too steep with the calorie deficit because you're going to start to mess with your hormones, your metabolism's going to start to slow down quite a bit, you're going to get a lot worse sleep because your hormones are all messed up, and it makes the process of losing weight much more miserable. Another very important thing to keep in mind is the amount of protein that you're eating. It's super important to hit your daily protein goals, and it's recommended to eat anywhere between 0.6 and 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. I've talked about protein a bunch. You have to eat protein. And just generally speaking, I really don't concern myself much with how many carbs or fats I'm eating. I just hit my protein goals and fill the rest in with carbs and fats, making my diet super easy to adhere to because I eat pretty much everything I want. And this is super important when you are trying to maintain a diet that is somewhat restricted and you're trying to lose weight. You still want to eat those foods that you love and enjoy. Now, what I found is the best way to get a general idea of how much of a calorie deficit you're actually in is by using my Apple Watch to see how many calories I'm burning every single day, and then I use an app called MyFitnessPal to see how much food I'm eating every single day. I know it's not 100% accurate, but I've done this for months and months at a time. I've seen results. I would definitely recommend that. Otherwise, you might be a little bit in the dark on how much of a calorie deficit you're going to be in. So with all that said, this is the schedule that I use when I'm really trying to adhere to a calorie deficit over a long period of time. So I usually stop eating between 10 and 11 at night, and I don't start eating again until around 1 or 2 p.m. the next day. Now, when you tighten up this window in which you're consuming all of your calories for that day, it makes eating in a calorie deficit immediately a whole lot easier. So this is like probably 80% of the strategy right here is simply just fasting for like 15 or 16 hours. But also, I don't actually fast every single day. There's some days where I do actually eat earlier in the morning by like 10 or 11. But there's also just a lot of health benefits to fasting, so I'm usually doing this between 5 and 6 days a week. Within this fasting period, I still am drinking caffeine in the mornings. I'm also drinking plenty of water, which definitely helps when you're feeling a bit more hungry. And if you have an issue with fasting, one of the easiest ways to get better at fasting for longer periods of time is simply week after week, push the time a little bit later for how long you're fasting. So take a week and start eating by 10 in the morning. And then by week 2 or 3, start eating by 12 in the afternoon, and before you know it, you can get used to this. And again, I don't recommend fasting every single day, but if you're doing it the majority of the week, it'll really make adhering to a calorie deficit a lot easier. Now, my first meal of the day is around 1 p.m. in the afternoon, and this is typically around 25 to 30% of my overall calories, as well as around 30% of my protein goals for the day. So for me, this meal ends up being between 500 and 600 calories and around 50 grams of protein. Now, with this first meal, I actually love to eat a big bowl of fruit with like a protein shake and maybe a piece of bread or something, and it takes almost no time to prepare. And then that 50 grams of protein really keeps me nice and full. And I usually like to keep this meal a little bit on the larger side because I'm very hungry after fasting. Also, I've personally been specifically loving blueberries lately. It's one of the best foods that you can eat specifically for your brain if you want improved cognitive function. The other nice thing about a big bowl of fruit is that it's not super calorie dense, so I can eat a bunch of this and it's very satiating. So if you're trying to maintain a calorie deficit, finding foods that are higher in volume but less in calories is always going to be something that can help you out. So my second meal is usually around 3 p.m. and this typically equates to 20 to 25% of my total daily calories. And as well, this meal is usually around 20% of my protein goals. So for me, this meal is usually between 400 and 500 calories. And of those calories, I'm usually eating around 40 grams of protein. Sometimes this is leftover chicken that I've cooked from the previous night's dinner, or maybe it's a protein bar. I really like Greek yogurt as well. For these first two meals, I rarely cook something something on like the stovetop or in the oven. I just want something that I can quickly grab and eat that helps me hit my protein goals, helps me hit some micronutrients as well. In between these two meals, it's like 90 grams of protein, and it's very, very filling. And this is going to keep me quite satiated until dinner. So once I have 2 meals in, at around 5 o'clock is when I work out. I'll do my strength training first, and then I'll do cardio. Now, a few months ago, and even a year ago, I used to do my strength training, my cardio, everything within that fasted window. So I would wake up first thing in the morning and do all of that then. Now, the tricky thing with this is if you're really trying to maintain a calorie deficit, but also get really good workouts in, you can do it in a fasted state. But if you've got some meals and some carbs in you, and then you go strength train, you're going to get a much better workout. And I've definitely learned this the hard way by really trying to push through fasted state workouts. Also, this workout is where I can increase my daily calorie expenditure. This is quite obvious, but I work out quite a bit. I also did just release my entire strength training and cardio routine. It's just $8 and it's linked in the description. I also put out a full video on that routine, so definitely check that out. But there's also quite a bit of a time commitment with that specific workout. So if you only have, let's say, an hour to work out from 5 to 6, you could do, let's say, 30 minutes of cardio and 30 minutes of strength training, and you may be able to burn between 400 and 500 calories, which is going to increase your daily energy expenditure, which is really where you can create that calorie deficit. Another great thing to keep in mind is working out in general, whether it's cardio or strength training, is typically a natural appetite suppressant. Those hunger hormones decrease a bit as you're working out, and you can go a little bit longer between meals 2 and your dinner meal 3, with that workout at around 5 p.m. So my dinner meal is usually around 8 p.m. and this will equate to around 35 to 40% of my total daily calories, as well as around 40% of my protein goals. So for me, my dinner meal is usually around 700 to 800 calories in total and around 60 grams of protein. A 700 or 800 calorie meal is actually pretty indulgent for me. Sometimes Allie and I will order food, or I can make a really delicious, tasty meal, hitting the protein goals and really enjoying it. Now, I really want you to keep in mind that these calorie numbers are specific to me based on my age, height, my weight, as well as how much I'm working out. So that's why I'm also giving you percentages of total calories as well as protein based on each meal, because you can then take those percentages and figure out your needs based on how many calories you eat every single day, as well as how much protein you need. By the time I'm done with dinner, I've only consumed between like 1,700 calories, maybe up to 2,000 calories, but not a ton, especially given that I work out a lot. Usually I expend around an extra 1,000 active calories, and usually my total daily expenditure in calories is over 3,000. So being that I've gotten to dinner with an extra like 1,000 calories to play with, I now have a lot of room to either have some extra treats at night if I want to, or eat in a little bit more moderation, and I can be in a calorie deficit. So this is where I get to my 4th meal, which is more of like a snack, and this is usually around 10 at night, and this will be 20 to 25% of my caloric goals, as well as around 10% of my protein goals for the day. For me, this snack ends up being maybe 300 or 400 calories and maybe around 20 grams of protein or so. So based on these 4 meals, my total caloric intake usually is between 2,100 and 2,200 calories and about 170 to 180 grams of protein. And this would be on a very moderate, tight weekday schedule. Now, again, factoring in my workouts, this is creating quite a huge deficit. So if I need to eat a little bit more than that, I will. If I need to work out a little bit less, I can also do that. But if it's a weekend, on each given meal, I'm going to have maybe a little bit more. Maybe I'll have one extra snack at night or something. Maybe I'll have an extra carb during the day. This typically averages out to around 500 calories a day. And again, I do want to remind you that all of this is based on my caloric needs, how much I work out, how much I weigh, my age, and my height. So you're going to want to figure all of that out first, and then apply some of these percentages that I've given you based on each meal. And from there, you're going to be quite mind blown at how easy it is to maintain a calorie deficit, lose weight, and still eat a bunch of food that you love. So that's exactly what I do to make a calorie deficit super easy to adhere to. I've really spent some time trying to tweak the timing of my meals to still get a really good workout in while still being able to maintain a calorie deficit. And this type of strategy when you're trying to lose weight is super important because it can get miserable. And especially if you think like, well, I can only eat salads in this unenjoyable food, that's usually why people end up failing. And they think they just have to cut out bread or eat like a rabbit to lose a bunch of weight. You may be creating too steep of a deficit, and within a week or two, you're like, all right, forget this, I can't do it. So I definitely hope this helps a lot of you out. There's also lots more goodies linked in the description. I've got a podcast, I've got Lightroom presets, cinematic mode presets, and my full strength training and cardio routine. Also, if you need good music for your videos, like this song here, go to moodsounddesign.com. Start a free trial with us today. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate the ongoing support, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace. Now if you personally is week after, it's simply just start. I rarely cook during the day. I rarely cook for these. So now that I've got two meals in, so once I have two meals in,